Hello, it's Typhoon Carter here, and today I'm bringing you another DPP OU video. It is Viability Rankings time. Now this is my personal VR for the year of 2024, or I guess the end of 2024. For me, it's been a long year where I've played in like a lot of DPP tournaments throughout. Played like in ADPL, where I went like 6-1 in DPP. Played in ROAPL, went like 4-2 there. Played in DPP PL, but I was playing like a lower tier there. I wasn't playing OU, but I was somewhat involved in the prep process for the ROU slots there. So I also like got relatively far in DPP Cup for this year's Smogon Classic. Got pretty far in Globals, where I made grand finals. Unfortunately, I lost to PKL, very good player, but yeah, you know, I've played a lot of DPP, and I feel like I want to do a viability rankings post. A lot's changed for like the past year in DPP, not in terms of tiering action, although there is potential change that might happen with Jirachi or Machamp. I'm not sure where that's gonna go, although I was recently asked to answer a survey about that, but that's neither here nor there to talk about. What is important though is that this is probably like, it's been about a full year since Baton Pass from DPP was unbanned, with the caveat that you can only allow what they call dry passing. So this means you can't Baton Pass any stats, but what you can do is you can run, like, you could pass like a substitute or like some other weird stuff like Aqua Ring. There was this one game I remember where Xcal loaded, it was like some Aqua Ring, Spear Goal, Baton Pass nonsense. And like the idea was that you would use Aqua Ring, like you would pass it to like the recipient and have it offset the sand damage, because DPP is a perma sand here. That being said though, I will, couple disclaimers, I'd say probably towards the end of C+ and maybe like some of the C tier mons and some of the no stuff are like just stuff that's kind of like whatever to me, although I probably won't go super into detail about that. That being said though, let's actually just get right into this. So at number 1 we have Jirachi. Jirachi's pretty self-explanatory. I would probably say regarding Jirachi is that Jirachi's a very versatile Pokemon. You could run almost any set on it. The most popular sets is like Body Slam, Iron Head, like Wish Protect. That's kind of like the backbone for a lot of stall teams, or like a very fat teams in particular. You could also run stuff like, you know, Iron Head, Body Slam, Fire Punch with like either Stealth Rock Glass or Protect, for example. Or you could also run like mixed sets. Like there's a lot of sets you can run with Jirachi. I've also seen some experimentation with Thunderbolt HP ground mix sets. Like that's also like not too bad either. There's some actual merit to that, because the idea is that you use a hidden power ground to be able to hit Heatran, and then Thunderbolt's like okay general coverage. Some people like to do Thunder, like because they want like extra damage, and so they still get like the benefits of like a possible 60% para, but like it's a little bit more inaccurate, so that's like a notable downside. And it's also like very versatile with like the kind of spreads you can run on it. And Jirachi's probably like the most centralizing Pokemon in the metagame for a good reason. Like you can, although to be frank, like the whole Jirachi, it's got Iron Head, flinch you to death, doesn't happen nearly as often as you think. To be honest, like it's usually more like spread paralysis, it'll like do its Jirachi thing, but like most teams need to run multiple Jirachi resilient checks. Like, you know, like you might need Heatran and then Metagross on the same team, for example, or even something like Swampert plus Heatran, just to make sure that you have enough ways to deal with Jirachi. And like nothing truly hard counters Jira ever. Like you can always tech Jira to like beat whatever checks you. It basically gets to pick and choose what beats it consistently. Right, so there's that. like even Scarf Jirachi sets are like pretty good because they're very variable in terms of what kind of stuff you can run. Like all the coverage in the world can like do it a lot as well, and it still has stuff like U-turn. Like there's a lot you can do with Jirachi, so you know, easy number one. Tyranitar number two. For me, like sand is probably like the most centralizing aspect of DPP. Like a lot of your teams, like you need to be sand resilient, or at least somewhat sand resilient. And T-Tar's thing is that you can item choice is very versatile. Like you know, Choice Scarf, Choice Band, Lumberry, Dragon Dance, Choppleberry, like Pashleberry, like, and even something like Custap. Like you have so many items that you can run on it, and then like the amount of variation in sets as well. Like, oh, you want to run, like, you know, like you could run Ice Beam Tar if you want. You can also run like Mixed Tar, DD, like all that good stuff. And then like CB Tar is probably like one of the hardest hitting things in the tier. Like it can like really rip some teams apart. Like Zap Me teams don't really particularly love CB Tar. And then like obviously like its speed tier is pretty middling, and Tar is like kind of like, it's just a great way to check most Latias variants to some degree. But even then, like although defensive Latias might be a little bit tougher, but the thing with Tar is like you can even run something like a Thunder Wave if you want. Like again, like it's just very versatile, does a lot of things you can ask it to do. And yeah, like it's just, and then even on the Dragon Dance sets, like you can run, usually most people just run like, you know, your DD Crunch EQ, and then either Fire Punch or Ice Punch, and then you even still have variations that might say run Stone Edge or like DD Taunt. So you know, there's that. Like it is probably one of the most versatile Pokemon you always need to account for in the builder in some way, shape, or form. Although yeah, so there's that. The typing can be a bit of a detriment at times, but like the Spadef boost in Sand is like very, very, very crucial for it. So you know, there's that. Like just very flexible. The reason why it's not number one is because like some teams really hate having Sand, so Tar can be like a detriment in some cases. But a lot of its pros like just heavily outweigh the cons that it brings to a team. Now, Latias at number 3. I have that at number 3 for a few reasons. For one, the important thing with Latias, defensive Latias, like Reflect Lati is probably like super hard to break. Probably one of the biggest noob checks in the builder. It's a pillar for a lot of defensive teams in DPP. Like, you know, you run like your Reflect, Ice Beam, Dragon Pulse, like Roost set or Recover. And like you are just going, like that is just very hard to break in some cases, especially because it didn't just spread para with ease. And that doesn't include like how annoying offensive teams really hate Choice Specs Latias and its ability to just kind of noob check people. Well, maybe not noob check, but like, yeah, it keeps you honest in the builder. Like you need multiple, like you need a Lati check, you need Jiro check, like all that stuff. And like this doesn't even, and then obviously you have like Healing Wish on like Choice Scarf sets, although Choice Specs can run it too. But yeah, like Choice Scarf probably like one of the best DD Gyarados revenge killers. It can also revenge kill like stuff like D-Knight, or like even like just cripple like a DD Tar that's at +2, and then you let something else that can actually eat a hit like come in on T-Tar, kill it back. Yeah, just very versatile Pokemon in general. And like that doesn't even include like the more underused sets. Like I'm talking like your CM Latis or like your Expert Pelt Lati sets. Like it's got a lot it can do, and not to mention the fact that unlike the other two Pokemon that's in front of it, it's also like Spike Immune, which is really, really nice. So there's that. Yeah, so that's like the S tier. I didn't get to mention this, but I'd probably say after A minus, or like is kind of when I stop like numbering the Pokemon in order of where I think they are. But just wanted to get that out of the way before I continue to A+ tier. A+, you have Gyarados. Gyarados is probably like the most centralizing sweeper. Every team needs to have a way to deal with Gyarados. Gyara is like a very versatile Pokemon in terms of what it can run. It can do like, in terms of like just variations to the Dragonite set, because like even when you know Dragonite is coming, it's like it can just surprise you in other ways. The most typical Gyara set, obviously it's like DD, Waterfall, Ice Fang, EQ, right? That's probably like your run-of-the-mill Gyarados set. And not to mention that most Choice Scarfers that try to come into Revenge Gyarados is like, it can't really come in safely, like Flygon or Rotom, like with Choice Scarfers, like they can't really come in safely. They take a lot from Waterfall. Even something like Scarf Latios doesn't love eating at Ice Fang if the Gyarados thinks it's coming. Stealth Rock weakness is obviously like huge in limiting it, but with Gyara it's like you could run like Wakan on like more hyper offense teams, or Lumberry if your team has trouble against like Paraspam and like all that good stuff. And the thing with Gyara is that obviously I made a video actually talking about the quote-unquote many faces DPP Gyara, but like you can tech for certain counterplays in different ways. Like for example, Fizdef Skarmory is normally like a decent way to check Gyarados, but you could say run something like Taunt, and then all of a sudden it's like now Skarmory is like kind of set up fodder and kind of has to like just try to Brave Bird you down. Intimidate is like just so nice on Gyarados because it can sometimes trade with like other Dragonite sweepers, or like force a DD sweeper to like click certain moves that it may not want to click, like for example against DD Dragonite. So like that's just like, again, just really centralizing. Like obviously there's like so many variations to the DD set, and that doesn't include like CB Gyara is like a pretty decent lead, although I think nowadays it's just kind of like it's just okay, but it's not really what it once was. I think there's a place for it, but yeah. And then obviously you have like defensive Gyara, like Roar Gyara. I think that's like a little more specific, but like it's a decent way to make use of like its Intimidate. Like you run like Rest Talk Roar on like hazard stack teams, and like you can just go to work on against like certain team styles. So there's that. Yeah, if it weren't for the SR weakness, I think it'd be S tier, like without a question. But yeah, let's just move on. Breloom. Oh my god, Breloom. Sleep is broken. Like that much is simple. Like there is not a lot of ways you can handle sleep very well in DPP. I mean, like one of your most surefire ways to actually handle Breloom is Celebi. And even Celebi has its own issues. The thing with Breloom though is like, one, it's like, you know, its longevity is actually pretty good considering Poison Heal. Basically it lets it heal like leftovers basically under sand, so that's like a really super nice thing about Breloom. Other thing with Breloom is that it is pretty hard to switch into. Like fighting plus grass stab is like scarily hard, and then if you're running like spore free attacks, like for example if you're doing focus punch over superpower, it's like yeah, you get that focus punch off like on a laddie coming in, and like an offensive laddie to be specific, it's like that's like almost 50%. It's like about 45% ish off the Latias's health, and then now it can't really come in anymore. More like it's so centralizing in terms of what it can do. Normally the way you try to beat it is stuff like maybe like Rest Talk Jira to keep it healthy, to keep it honest, or even something like Zapdos, like have something else take the sleep and then have Zapdos try to check it. But even then, like Breloom has like a couple other viable sets. Like, you know, obviously there's Choice Scarf, but that's a fundamentally different Pokemon in terms of how it operates. And you obviously got stuff like defensive sets with like, you know, Spore, Force Palm, Leech, Tech. Obviously you need T-Tar support for that, but like yeah, that's also a very annoying set. Or like Sub Punch Breloom, and then Mach Punch lets it be like probably one of the most reliable DD Tyranitar checks in the tier. So again, like just very, very good at what it does. It's very centralizing. Like you always have to have a way to deal with it. You either deal with it by outpacing it with offense, trying to not give it opportunities to come in safely, or you have like a team that's like super resilient and they bring in like defensive Latios to basically wall the Breloom. Like that's just a couple examples. And yeah, but sleep carries this thing a lot, although like non-spore sets like SD Facade is honestly not too bad either, all things considered. And yeah, so and then we have Heatran next, sitting in at number 6. Heatran, probably like one of the best Jirachi checks in the tier, or at least one of the more consistent ones. Most Heatrans nowadays will just run Shuka Berry, although you may see Passion Berries on like non-choice sets. Leftovers can sometimes be a thing, but like with Clefable's presence in the tier, like nowadays, like you can't really run that sub-torment set. It can't really like run the Lava Plume stuff as easily. So, you know, there's that. But like, yeah, it's a very good Stealth Rock setter. Forces out Jirachi, can still do okay and can still boom on stuff that would threaten it. As like its speed tier is like interesting because like 278's a important speed tier because like you can get the early boom off on something like Gyarados, Adamant, Dragonite, and DD Tyranitar, like just a few examples. And like a Shuka Berry can sometimes just let you trade versus some stuff like Flygon. So, you know, it's just a few examples of what it can do. Choice Spec sets very potent. Choice Scarf Heatran is also not bad either. So there's that. And then next up we have Clefable. Clefable is probably like one of the most centralizing Pokemon that you have to prepare for. Like you need to always have a game plan to deal with Clefable in DPP, because if you don't have a way to deal with it, then like the team might just not be that great, or it's gonna struggle a lot, or you're just hoping you don't run into a Clef. Like Magic Guard is just ridiculously broken. Knockoff is just also absurd as a move. The only reason it's not any higher is because like it's just not nearly as splashable on teams. Like it usually only really belongs on very balanced or very defensive teams in general. So that's the only reason why Clefable isn't higher. But yeah, everybody knows what it does. It can spread power. It has like a great utility move pool. Like you want to run Encore, you want to run like Heal Bell or Aromatherapy, like, or Knockoff. Like all those options are available. And like even like nowadays you aren't really gonna see CM Clefable take over games, but you will see like Clefable just being a total annoyance for you like on the opponent's side, because like the thing with Knockoff in Gen 4 is that it is so stupid in the sense that if you knock something off, the item doesn't really go away, it just makes the item unusable. This also means that you can't actually trick anything, which is like really dumb. Like yeah, like you could just knock off like a Latias's choice specs, for example, and then now all of a sudden Latias can't trick you. Same deal with like Choice Scarf Rotom. Like it is just really stupid, but having something that can just withstand hazards, not care about residual damage, just goes a long way. Although like it can still get overwhelmed by certain, like most special attackers hate it, but to be honest, like you can still overwhelm some variations of Clefable with something like a lead modest Suicune with Lumberry, for example, like just hydro pumping its way through. So that's just like a couple examples where it can just do that. And yeah, let's move on to A tier. I have Rotom, but it's not the base Rotom form. I'm actually tiering the Rotom appliances. So the Rotom appliances, the thing with that is like it's probably like like Will-O-Wisp is like probably the biggest thing. Like it is a total pain for hyper offense teams to deal with, and then even against something like Clefable, it still has tools to like annoy Clefable with something like Subsplit. And then you have like Choice Scarf, like again very versatile mon. I think the biggest issue, kind of like Latias, that I didn't really mention, was the fact that it is Tyranitar food. Like Tyranitar will just usually destroy it, although like both have their ways around it. Like Rotom can like Will-O-Wisp it, like choiced Tyranitar, just to like kind of cripple it, have Pursuit or Crunch not do nearly as much damage. Like, so that's something that Rotom can do to kind of get around it. But Rotom appliances, like you can check all the DDers, you still have Trick, you have all that great stuff, and then that doesn't include like all the, and then it's like also a great spin blocker too. Very, very good at doing that. It can block Starmie and actually kill it. Fortress, it can block it and then cripple it, so that Payback doesn't do nearly as much. Just like a few examples. What was it can do? And then like S-Ball T-Bolt is like a surprisingly okay stab combo, and you can still run a coverage move of choice. And then like you can use this different Rotom appliance forms to kind of bluff certain coverages that you may or may not have. So like that's a few things it can do. Yeah, it's just overall very good. Although it obviously has issues against Clefable, but like I said, even something like Subsplit can kind of work around it to some degree, but Pain Split not really the most consistent thing ever. Now we have Skarmory. Skarmory's whole thing is spikes. Yeah, like kind of like ADV spikes, just goes crazy. You can just annoy people, and then now you have like an actual good like flying stab in Brave Bird. Obviously you have like the whole issue of being trapped by like the Magneton line, but like even then, like you can run something like Shed Shell. But to be honest, if you're running Shed Shell on Skarmory, it's like the lack of leftovers becomes a lot more noticeable against like opposing DD Pokemon, especially against Gyarados, where all of a sudden your longevity does not look nearly as great. Like not having that 6% every turn is like a notable downside. And then like Skarmory, the nice thing is that you can still run like lead Skarmory sets on hyper offense with like double hazards, taunt, and then use Brave Bird to basically sack itself, and once its sash is broken, so you can get free entry for its teammates. And like yeah, it's like another pillar of defensive teams. Decent lead on HO, but I think it's like another one of those Pokemon that you need to have something that can on your team that can actually break it, because like I've seen teams that didn't have great Skarmory counterplay just get completely 6-0'd by like spikes and like phasing in general. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then we have Metagross. Metagross is probably like the go-to Latias check on hyper offense teams. Like it's a great dragon resist that can still hit hard. You can run Trick Iron Ball, you could run it as a Stealth Rock setter if you want to run like an anti-lead. So like it's just great at enable. It just compresses a lot of rows, and there's a lot I can do. Choice Scarf sets are like okay as like, for example, like you run Scarf meta to like revenge kill DD Gyarados. Those you can still like get a lot of mileage with Trick in general. And of course you have like Explosion. Like its explosions are still hits very hard, destroys a lot of things. The only thing that really walls it is like Rotom, specifically like defensive Rotom, which can like cripple it back with Will-O-Wisp. But yeah, like that's kind of, and then like Skarmory can wall some variations, or like can really hard wall a lot of Metagross sets. Although like even something like Trick Iron Ball can kind of work around the whole Skarmory problem. So yeah, like there's kind of that whole thing going with meta. Like it threatens back. Only downside is that its speed tier is a little low. Although it can usually trade with like all three of like it can trade with Gyarados. It can beat Tyranitar straight up with some bulk investment. And then it can also like usually get a 1-for-1 against D-Knight if it hasn't taken prior trip damage, or like at least not too much. So that's a couple things it can do there. Just really good overall. Now you have Flygon. Flygon is okay. Flygon is very good. However, I have to say that Mixed Flygon is probably the biggest on paper threat in DPP OU, like in the tier, like in general. Because the thing is, yes, in theory, Mixed Flygon can defeat a lot of teams, can destroy a lot of teams. However, the issue is that in practice, Mixed Flygon is very limited on the types of structures it can fit on, in my opinion. Like, Mixed Flygon's a great win condition on like spike stack stall teams, but the issue is that base 100 speed is a great benchmark, but as an actual speed tier, the problem is that because you don't have that choice scarf anymore, Flygon kind of just gets forced out by a lot of things now. Like Latios forces it out, Jirachi can possibly force it out. +1 Gyarados doesn't care about it anymore. More like all that stuff, right? And then choice scarf Flygon on the other hand, again, like both Mix and choice scarf Flygon are good Pokemon. Scarf Flygon, the issue with that is that it's a great offense killer, but the problem is that you just fall short against like Zap Me. You have issues against like stall teams, obviously, because the most you can really do is just U-turn 99% of the time. Although like Flygon's like a really good revenge killer against something like DD Gira, DD Tar, DD Dragonite, all that stuff, right? So Flygon's like a very solid Pokemon. It's like offense has a hard time dealing with choice scarf Flygon, and then like defensive teams might have a hard time like dealing with Flygon if like it's got like all the hazards up, like if it's got 3 layers of spikes, stealth rock, like a lot of stuff, like Hippowdon suddenly can't switch in on it. The only thing that can really switch in on it is like Clefable, but even Clefable, like you can tech for that with like, you could run like more attack EVs on like 200 attack EVs with like 56 special attack EVs as like investment to like 2-hit KO Flygon, or Clefable, sorry, not Flygon. So you know, there's that going for overall. Just like it's very good, but like it has like a lot of very noticeable problems where like both sets kind of FUD into like certain archetypes a lot harder than expected. Although Choice Band is like not bad either though. Choice Band's okay, a bit of an underused set in general, but again, like the speed tiers have a problem, but like it's a surprisingly decent wall breaker. If you're using it on lead, like you could really slam some stuff pretty hard. So there's that. Gengar. Oh my god, Gengar. Gengar is probably one of the most infuriating Pokemon in DPP. Like, you hate playing against it, and then when you use it, it's like you just feel nothing but anxiety when using Gengar, because Focus Blast's accuracy is painful to say the least. But Gengar, again, like 110 speed, same speed tier as Latias, very, very good. Shadow Ball can be pretty spammable, like Shadow Ball plus Focus Blast. The issue is actually hitting Focus Blast in general. Although, like, even then, it's like you have some decent options with Gengar. Like, you can run Taunt, you could run like Will-O-Wisp, and like it's got and then there's also Explosion Gengar, but Explosion Gengar is kind of a forgotten. It's not really used as much anymore for good reason. And then you have something like Gengar. Okay, Subsplit Gengar is like a set that I've really come to love. During the past year in DPP, like I think it can be pretty annoying to check. Like with Pain Split Substitute, like you can annoy defensive teams really hard. And then like against like offensive teams, it's like you could run like, or more balanced teams, you can run like Will-O-Wisp with Taunt, and then to like cripple something like Jirachi from like doing its usual nonsense, or at least like make it not nearly as effective. But again, like the accuracy issue is like just really glaring, if it was able to actually land its moves, then I'd say Gengar's probably like an A+, probably like number 10 Pokemon. Like, just like a huge disclaimer. A-. Okay, yeah, I have Zap Me next to each other. Again, this is kind of where I stopped giving a crap about ordering of within the tiers. So I'll talk about Zapdos and then I'll talk about Starmie, because like they're part of a infamous core known as Zap Me, which is like okay. It's generally viewed as a reliable core. Zapdos, again, like Zapdos you can do, I'm gonna say, but Zapdos is probably like the first Pokemon on this list that has some application with Baton Pass, but Baton Pass Zapdos is like okay. The only reason as of right now, besides substitute Baton Passing, that you would really use BP Zapdos is to avoid pursuit damage. That is the only real reason you would use it. And although to be honest, people haven't really used it that often. I think Charles used a team with sub BP Zap in Coup Critique, from what I remember, which was like a cool application, but that's not really the main thing about Zapdos. What makes Zapdos really good is that like it's a defensive stalwart. Even with the rocks weakness, like Zapdos is just so resilient. It is hard to like kind of really punch through safely, especially for like a lot of Pokemon like really solid checking Gyarados. Even with rocks, it can check Breloom. Like Breloom can't really touch it, and then like it can spread paralysis. So like you can get a lot of value out of Zapdos, and even something like Gliscor has to fear like HP ice, and then like Zapdos is still like pretty versatile in terms of what kind of sets it can run. Zapdos, like I remember there was this one set I was playing against Christos in Globals, and what I remember was like in game 2, I remember this very fondly. Like Christos had a sub Zapdos set that was mono T-Bolt, but also had Toxic, probably because I did not use Clefable nearly as much, but like yeah, that was a set that I remember was like really annoying for my team because like I didn't have a great Toxic absorber. Like it can still do nonsense like that every now and then, but like the real go-to set that most people use would be like Thunderbolt, Roost, Hidden Power, Ice, and then like either U-Turn last or Thunder Wave. But yeah, it's a very resilient Pokemon. It can wall it can wall Choice Flygon. It can wall Jirachi. It can wall most Jirachi sets, at least like without and burn away like those Iron Head PPs and all that stuff. So like that's kind of like one of the really endearing things about Zapdos, although Zapdos still kind of hates special attackers, but to be honest, very good, very solid lead. Not really, you don't really see Zapdos used as like an offensive powerhouse anymore. More like you don't really see offensive Zap nearly as much just because of Clefable's existence, but every now and then you could still see it running something like Heat Wave to get past like Bronzong, for example, or like Sub Discharge is like a really annoying set to like just like pressure is very good on this thing. Like you can just kind of PP stall out something like a Pert if you play well enough and all that stuff, and it has like reliable recovery, just really hard to break sometimes. Starmie, the back half of what people would call the Zap Me core. Starmie, defensive Starmie is pretty good. Like obviously it's a paralysis spreader. Actually kind of uses a somewhat similar set to like what it uses in RBY to some degree, or actually no, more so GSC and even ADV, like the mono Starmie with T-Wave, Surf. Although like in more recent times we've started to see some variations of Starmie use like Surf Psychic instead of like Surf T-Bolt. The reason for this is because like it ensures that you are not fodder for Breloom to come in safely, and it also lets it be Gengar, which means that you can actually rapid spin against more offensive teams. So that's like a really nice thing about Starmie. And it's like okay as a spinner, but obviously there's the whole being Tyranitar food problem. So like that's always a thing you always have to watch out for. Offensive Starmie is like is not as good, but like it's okay because it has some versatility in sets. But defensive Starmie, the whole thing with that is that it is like probably one of the biggest noob checks. Like sometimes your team might just not have a great way to deal with Starmie. Like it is one of those things that can just beat you on the spot. Kind of like what it does in ADV, but in DPP, it doesn't do that nearly as often, but it definitely can, or force like really weird situations that might not be desirable. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about offensive Starmie. Offensive Starmie it's okay, again, like really good against offense, but I don't really use Bolt Beam Hydro Pump Starmie nearly as much with like Rapid Spin, mostly because like I think it just sometimes lacks the power, although sometimes you can what a set that I have enjoyed using is Choice Spec Starmie on lead, because like Starmie with Choice Spec can just with Hydro Pump can like just do a lot of damage to a lot of targets. In general, like even something like Gyarados won't love taking a Hydro Pump. Latios doesn't love taking a Specs boosted Hydro. Like it can just do a lot of that stuff with like basically ease, to say the least. And man, like Starmie, it is, and like yeah, obviously offensive Starmie, like the typical off me with like the Rapid Spin, like Bolt Beam coverage can still beat down like a lot of teams. Like it can beat your like DD spam teams, it can beat hyper offense, although like it doesn't always love dealing with more balanced teams, and it still has like some decent utility with Trick on the Choice Spec set. Choice Scarf's like interesting one. I actually did use that one time in like I think in like a Rising Stars game, and it worked out okay, but obviously like the Hydro accuracy is always going to be very stressful, and you generally just kind of need that extra power to punch through some targets that you might not otherwise get past. So you know, there's that with Starmie. Dragonite is probably one of the most terrifying special mixed breakers in DPP. Probably one of the hardest ones to break through. It's great as a lead. It's decent in the back. It's got a couple variations to its mix set. Like you could run like Roost free attacks D-Knight against like more defensive teams. You could run like Extreme Speed as that fourth move. There's also, I've used a couple variations that Student of Sinnoh made with like Aqua Tail D-Knight, which is like interesting thing, like kind of like to work around the superpower defense drop and attack drop in general. Like it's a decent mid-ground click, and like obviously Draco and Fire Blast goes hard. Dragon Dance D-Knight is not really what it used to be. Like it can still do stuff, but I think like it's just not the force that it used to be because like a lot of stuff kind of passively checks it like by proxy. Like normally a lot of teams that need to check DD Gyarados or DD Tar, they'll run like Scarf Flygon, or they'll run like Scarf Latias, which is both stuff that D-Knight hates. And then D-Knight, like you always kind of have to choose what walls it per se on the Dragon Dance sets. Like for example, I could run like Outrage. I could run like Outrage is basically undroppable, and then I could say run Fire Punch Extreme Speed, and then now it's like, oh, Heatran, you choose to let Heatran wall you, or you could run like, oh, Outrage, EQ Fire Punch, and then like you don't have a great way to deal with something like Scarf, like to get the jump on Scarf Latias. But DD Knight can pick and choose its checks, but like Outrage is like not the best stab move to like work with. Like just the locked in drawback just opens it up to being revenge kill by certain stuff. Although I think like mixed D-Knight is generally just more consistent whereas DDD Knight is kind of like more of a endgame sweeper, that kind of thing, which I guess that's kind of DD sweepers in general. But yeah, my main point is that I just think like you get a lot more mileage out of mixed D Knight. I cannot forget about Choice Band D Knight. Choice Band D Knight's a bit rare, but like I think that set's okay. It's probably like one of the few like choice mons that I would say would be passable as a Sleep Talk user, because like because I need to like get this rant out the way. Like Sleep Talk on most Pokemon, like Sleep Talk on choiced Latias is throwing most of the time. Like there's times where it fits, but most of the time you just can't afford to run that. You might be able to run it on something like Rest Talk Jirachi, but even then it's like that's not the best use of Jirachi most of the time. But more so my whole grievance is just like Sleep Talk on choice Pokemon, like most of the time, like from a principled standpoint. But D Knight is probably one of the few where like if you're running like Sleep Talk on a choiced mon, then like it's okay, but like even then, like Choice Man D Knight is like very awkward to use in general. So but yeah, no, like most of the time, like mixed D Knight, very, very good at what it does. Moving on, we have Gliscor. Gliscor is such a weird Pokemon to me. And I know it sounds weird to say that, despite ranking it in like A-. Gliscor's whole thing is that I think it feels like an incomplete Pokemon sometimes. Because it just feels like there's so many moves. Like it has a lot of great moves, right? Like it has Taunt, it has Knockoff, it has like, you know, Roost, it has like okay coverage, like, and then you even have something like, and then although sometimes you want to run something like Sky Attack or Wing Attack, a Wing Attack on like more bulky teams so that you have a way to deal with Breloom, and then like also I guess stab against Gengar, but it's not really status absorber. And sometimes, and then like 317 is a good speed tier, but sometimes you're just like, man, I just want a little more speed on this. But you know, like the taunt sets are okay, but like I think like using it personally, I'm just like, I don't feel like I'm the biggest fan of Gliscor, but playing against it, like Gliscor can feel really frustrating because like of the sets it could run. Not to mention like it still has like some great moves like U-turn, like in pivot, it can do all like it can do a lot of great things, right? The only issue I find is more so like choosing what you want on that Gliscor, you know what I'm saying? So there's that. Yeah, so there's that going. B+ tier. Hippowdon, probably. Hippo is basically like the go-to sand setter on most DPP teams. Or not most DPP teams, but most DPP stall teams. The other thing with Hippo is that Hippo, you can run, like, usually it's like you can run mono Hippo with like Slack Off, EQ, Stealth Rock, and then Whirlwind, but sometimes it's just like with Hippo, it's kind of like, it's just like really hard to break. Like DDers kind of hate dealing with it, like it can feel unkillable at times. So like there's kind of that whole thing going, but like even then it's like you run something like Toxic on Hippo, you can run Ice Fang to get around like Flygon, or you can like just be annoying, phase stuff out. Like it can be very hard to break for some teams. Infernape's resurgence these last few years has been pretty good. After like when most people thought Infernape was unviable because of Latias's comeback into DPP, but Infernape really good at bullying those kind of passive like Zap Me teams. It's very good at bullying like slower teams. Although I think the thing with Infernape is that it is a very low floor, high ceiling mon, right? That's basically Infernape in a nutshell. You got because it has to contend with hazards. It is very frail, and then usually, sometimes you kind of need, for example, you need Life Orb for that extra damage or something like Expert Belt. And then sometimes it will just have games where it can just completely take over, and obviously it's like another like Mach Puncher that can kind of check Tyranitar to some degree. So like obviously Infernape's got like a lot going for it, right? Latias is probably like the single biggest limiter with like Infernape, like, and then obviously you have like the whole Gyarados problem, because Gyarados usually would just wall most variants of Infernape unless you go out your way to attack for it with like Thunder Punch, but even then it's like it just feels like you can't really fit that most of the time. And Infernape, like, again, it's just really good at bullying slower teams, and like it's still pretty solid into offensive teams. And that's kind of like Infernape's story in a nutshell. And and you have like a decent amount of variation in what kind of Infernape set you can run. Like you can run specially biased Infernape sets with like HB Ice, Grass Knot, for example. Although against slower teams, I think one funny thing with Infernape is that you can just totally flowchart your way. You can totally beat down those teams by flowcharting, like you can just kind of U-turn into an incoming Latias and still get some decent value out of it. But I think like Infernape's one of those Pokemon that like when you are using it, like you need to support it. Like it needs a lot of support, but if you can properly support it in the builder, then I think like it is worth the trouble. Like that is basically like Infernape in a nutshell. I think like a lot of the Pokemon that's above it, I think on its own they're already very good. But Infernape, it's like you just gotta give it that little extra help. Like you need to pair it with something that can check Gyarados, for example, like Infernape with HP Electric, Super Suicune, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, or like, you know, with like Choice Scarf Latias. And then like if you compare it with something like Healing Wish support to give it that second breath of life to just kind of push past like certain like bulky teams, but like I think like the rewards that it can reap is like very good. And like especially with Celebi's resurgence as a Breloom check, I think like Infernape has gotten even more value out of like bullying those Celebi teams. And yeah, Suicune is a Pokemon that I'd say can be a mixed bag, I think is the best way to describe it. Like lead Suicune can be very good, but like the middling speed tier, and then like obviously like it has a lot of coverage that it can handle, but sometimes it's like, yeah, you just feel like you want a little bit more out of your Suicune. And like it's a great like lead Suicune, very good into defensive teams. Obviously, and then like Suicune is like not really a defensive stalwart like it is in ADV, but Suicune also has this problem of hazards. Hazards is like a really big problem for it, especially in a gen with Stealth Rock and lots of phasing that it's got to deal with, and then like paralysis. Because like with Suicune, it's like most of the time it's like you can't really run like Rust like Crocune is just not it. And like Mono Surf is not cutting it. You need all that coverage, so you want it to be more of an offensive stalwart mostly. And then like its speed tier is very crucial in that it outspeeds stuff like Adamant Lucario. It outspeeds Heatran. So and then like it outspeeds Breloom. Although like on lead sets you kind of want to run Modest so that you can kind of brute force past something like a Clefable on lead. So there's that. Like it's a very good offensive Pokemon, but like it can feel very limited in terms of what you can run with it. Empoleon, very good lead. Still a great lead to this day, whether it's Focus Sash with rocks or if it's like Choice Specs lead. And then Empoleon, back Empoleon is like a bit more like, again, like it can definitely sweep some teams on the spot, but sometimes it just feels like you just kind of need that extra mileage, but like Subpataya with agility can take, like, you need to basically get a lot to set up to get into that position to kind of punch past things. Like you can punch, like with Torrent, it's like you can punch past Clefable, but obviously you have to contend with stuff like Mach Punch Infernape, Mach Punch Breloom obviously, so that's partly why Empoleon, like the speed tier, like just kind of getting it set up can be a little bit difficult, and I think the fact that it's very slow can be a detriment sometimes. But Empoleon, again, like it can do, it's a very good lead. And then Subpataya is like, okay, some people have tried SD, but SD is like kind of a meme. But yeah, so that's kind of where I stand on Empoleon. Machamp is like, okay, it's Dynamic Punch the Mon. Confuse hacks, that's kind of what everybody thinks about Machamp. It's such a stupid Mon, but like obviously you generally need to build around Machamp to really maximize its talents. Like Subchamp can just in theory beat down a lot of teams, but in practice that's not always the case, because like the Dynamic Punch DPP can sometimes matter against offensive teams. Like it's not the most sturdy thing ever. Lead Machamp is like, it can still be really annoying, you can, but like I think it's just kind of limited in terms of what kind of archetypes can work with Machamp in general. But Machamp is still like vulnerable to Hazard, still vulnerable to status, and then like it's not very fast, but like Dynamic Punch just goes the distance on this thing. Celebi is probably one of the most interesting resurgence projects, to say the least, in the last like year or so. Surprisingly, it's not because of the Baton Pass unban. I will say that like Baton Pass Celebi is like Baton Pass Celebi is like okay. I ran a team with Celebi sub BP into like Magnet Rise Magnezone, so that you can trap Skarmory, and then not only can you trap Skarmory, but you can use the sub to kind of give it safe entry against Bronzong, force it to boom on you. Like that's just something you can definitely do with Celebi. And then even against something like Heatran, you can run like, I ran a offensive take on it where you can do like Grass Knot, and then you can do Earth Power. Like you get the sub up, Heatran comes in, tries to disrupt your Baton Pass, and then you use Earth Power, kind of just get the jump on it. And then like you can kind of like just beat it that way, and it can enable certain Pokemon like Lucario to just outright sweep in some instances. But enough about sub BP Celebi. The actual reason why Celebi has really risen up on my VR anyways, and why I think a lot of people think the same, is because of the fact that it's probably the best Breloom check right now. Like Breloom usually cannot do a lot to Celebi, and then like Celebi can directly threaten it back. Obviously you have Natural Cure, so like the Celebi Breloom dynamic is a little bit weird, because like if you stay in, like there's a chance Breloom could switch out, bring Tar in, and then now you're like kind of in trouble and get pursued, take a lot of damage. Or but the thing with Celebi is that Celebi can just straight up be nearly impossible for some teams to reliably kill, because like if you're just doing like a recover G-Knot T-Wave, like that's a very annoying mon to break in general, and I think it's very good at noob checking stuff. And again, like the fact that it's probably the best Breloom check we have right now goes a long way. Even stuff like T-Tar, it's like T-Tar doesn't really love eating a stab Grass Knot from Celebi, even with the Spadef boost. So that's just a couple things with that. Anyways, yeah, so again, this is up to B tier. I'm probably going to do a separate recording session that I will edit back in, because I need a break right now. So I'll probably resume this in a bit. Alright, we're back from my commercial break, per se, if you want to call it that. But we had just finished up the B plus tiers, and we're onto the B tiers on my VR. Bronzong, Lucario, Swampert, Azelf, and the Magnezones family. So we got that going. Bronzong is interesting mon. I think it like you have lead Bronzong, which is not a bad mon because of the fact that it can run both heat proof and levitate like viably, or at least both abilities are pretty viable on the lead set. Heat proof lets you get the jump on lead Heatran, like maybe get the jump on it, like EQ, like get surprise KO, live some stuff. Also like lets it kind of beat lead D-Knight, and like it's not a bad way to like get your game started, like just explode early, get rocks up, all that stuff, right? Bronzong also can be pretty difficult to break through on as like a defensive backbone on some teams. Like some teams might just have trouble breaking through Zong reliably. Like for example, non Fire Punch variations of DD-Tar kind of don't love dealing with Zong because Zong can kind of just trade against it and punish the setup. Gyarados doesn't love to deal with Zong in the sense that it can just kind of just explode on it. It can live a waterfall barring flinches. D-Knight, same deal, like it can just punish with Gyro Ball, all that stuff, right? The issue with Bronzong is that it really falls flat against Skarmory. Like Skarmory just basically uses Bronzong as spike fodder, like stall teams don't love it. Like Zong is like a great anti-offense mon. That's probably the best way to describe it. Also walls non-iron ball variations, or like trick iron ball variations of Metagross. And then like OTR Zong is, or what some people would call offensive trick room Bronzong is a little iffy. Like it's okay, but like it's not really gonna go on places in that way. So it's not bad, but it has like some very clear limitations, struggling against like those bulky like Skarm Clef teams. That's like always be a bit of a knock against it. It usually matches up pretty well into most Jirachi variants, like even those that are running Fire Punch. So like that's kind of the thing with Bronzong. Lucario. Lucario is a bit of a weird one because it feels weird to see it bump up, and you're probably wondering, okay, what's changed for Lucario? Because like on the official VR, it's like what, B minus or like B free. That's what they have it listed as currently. Lucario, I think the thing with Lucario that makes it benefit compared to other fighters, or like the reason why you might use it, I think it's a very good cleaner on those sub baton pass teams. Like it's extremely threatening. You're probably wondering, okay, like sub BP sounds like a kind of a meme, which I mean, I wouldn't say it's a meme per se. I just say it's more specific, and I think Lucario is like a great recipient of like a sub BP from something like a Celebi, because like it's extremely good into defensive teams. Like yeah, you get one SD, and then now all of a sudden it's like threatening a KO into almost anything. On SD sets, I would say that close combat, E-speed, those are like kind of like your mandatories. Like you should not drop these ever. And then obviously the last move is kind of where you have some variation. Ice Punch is pretty viable. You also have Bullet Punch, obviously, and then there's also Crunch to nail Rotom. So like you have a couple variations, and then I mean yeah, T-Punch is also an option too, but like Scarf Lucario, I think ever since the copycat mechanic discovery that they made, Lucario has kind of lost a bit of its luster as like this anti-stall tool, where like because there was a period in time where like a copycat Scarf Lucario would basically be able to force so much progress against stall unless you had Protect. So like that's kind of a thing that Lucario had going for it, but like because it lost that tool, can't really do that anymore. So like I don't think Scarf sets are nearly as viable. it's like okay, but like I think that speed tier, it has like the 306 range or 279 if you're running Adamant Lucario, which you should on most SD sets, is kind of like the main thing it has going for it. Like, it just hits really hard. Like at +2, it's like you're threatening a KO on Skarmory after rocks. You're threatening a KO on like Latios. Like, it can threaten a lot of stuff, but I think the issue for Lucario is actually getting to that position, because its steel typing can be really nice. You could take advantage of like a Latios that is choice locked into Draco Meteor, you SD up, and then you use that to basically try to win the game in like an offense versus offense matchup. And then against defensive teams, finding that opportunity can be difficult, but like if you're using something kind of cheesy like the Celebi Subpass strat, then Lucario can really take off. Like, I've definitely had games where I just won basically just off of that alone. And yeah, Swampert, Water Ground, obviously a very good defensive typing. Breloom's viability, like Breloom being as good as it is, hurts it a little bit. The other issue with Swampert is generally the fact that it has trouble against Skarm teams. Like, again, like just spikes, like Skarm just has spikes all over it. Unless you're running like special variants of like Pert, then maybe you can kind of try to break through it. But then now all of a sudden it's like you have issue against like Clefable. Mixed sets can kind of work, but again, like it's mostly down to like the fact that Breloom can kind of just threaten it, and the fact that you have issues against like Skarm in general. Mixed is okay, as I said. It's a decent rocker, and like Water Ground is still like a really good stab combo. That being said, though, I think like Celebi's Resurgence also hurts Swampert's placement a little bit. Like, just the fact that Celebi has become more common in tournaments like throughout this year, like just being a more popular pick in general. And that's kind of like one of those things where like, oh, another Mon's Rise can cause like something that already existed and has been established to kind of fall out of place a little. So that's kind of where Pert's place is. It's kind of in a very awkward spot, and I think it's just a little bit worse off compared to like its other fellow water types like Suicune and Empoleon in that regard. Azelf will just kind of do its usual thing, like, you know, get rocks up, boom, be like a staple in hyper offense, taunt stuff, be annoying. Like, that's kind of like Azelf. That's what it's been doing forever. Like, it doesn't really run Sash nearly as much. CB Azelf is something that I kind of like too, like be able to get that turn 1 boom right off the bat, like, yeah, 1-for-1 more often than not is like really nice. Force a 5v5. So that's kind of like one of the nice things about Azelf in general, like just CB Azelf. And then lead sets, it's like like your typical lead Azelf set is like kind of not what it used to be. It can still do its thing, but nowadays a lot of people, they'll run like Lumberry to kind of get around lead Breloom with sleep. The idea is that, oh, it spores you, and then you would use it to like basically T-Wave and all that jazz. Oh yeah, CB Azelf is probably like what the other choice band use. I mentioned CBD Knight as being viable to use Sleep Talk. CB Azelf can kind of do that too, to some degree, mostly because 99% of the time you're clicking Explosion anyway, so like Sleep Talk is like you don't have a real opportunity cost, and you still get to nuke something as you go. So there's that with Azelf. Magneton and Magnezone, I'm going to talk about these two together because they're very they're like kind of the same role, it's just the way they execute their roles is very different. Magneton, again, you're using it if your team desperately needs a DD Gyara Revenge Killer, like it, or like a DD Dragonite Revenge Killer. Usually it will run HP Ice, it will run T-Bolt. It's just like kind of a matter of what you want it to do, and also like because it always runs Scarf, other neat thing it can do is that it can just trade, trap a Jirachi that had just gotten a kill, come in, cripple it, do all that stuff, right? So it's got that going. That's kind of why you would use Magneton. Magnezone, again, like I talked about Celebi, like sub BP earlier, Magnezone I think is like a decent beneficiary of that strat, because being able to pass like a substitute onto like a Magnezone, like on an incoming Bronzong for example, that's like another target now that it can do a better job at being able to trap. Like you use Magnet Rise, you have a safe entry point, so you don't have to hard read the Bronzong, and then like you like trade down Force of Boom, or in some cases like you might even just be able to keep your Magnezone and then get a favorable outcome against like the Bronzong, or even like something like Heatran. Actually no, not really Heatran, but even something like Fortress or Metagross. Like you have those similar interactions, being able to pull that off safely. That's kind of the nice thing that Magnezone benefits from the BP unban. But that being said, Magnezone otherwise still kind of does a lot of its usual things. Endure Custap is okay, like it's not used nearly as much, but I think it's still viable. Scarf can be viable, but it's like at that point I would rather just use Magneton. And then you have like your typical like T-Wave set, like with lefties, explosion, all that stuff, right? So Magnezone still kind of does its thing, just has like a little bit of a stronger boom, a little more durable, which can be helpful in the Jirachi matchup, where like you don't die right away, you trade it with T-Wave, that kind of thing. That's where you might consider using Magnezone over Magneton, because like Magneton has to run Scarf more often than not, whereas Magnezone, different story, right? And also the other reason you might run Magnezone over Magneton is for Hidden Power Fire. If you want to trap something like Scizor or Fortress, that's kind of where that comes into play, because like a Magneton, like you can't really afford to run HP Fire. I mean, it's extremely rare, but like you would rather just run HP Ice because of the speed IV drops from HP Fire, which means that now instead of outright being able to revenge kill Gyarados, it's now at +1. Now it's like a speed tie, so that's kind of like some of the important things to note there. B- tier, we have Aerodactyl. Not much to say here. Aerodactyl just kind of does its usual thing. Get rocks up, taunt, maybe get some damage, die, all that stuff, right? So the lead metagame hasn't changed too much. I guess the only silver lining is like Jolteon, maybe. That's kind of like a nice matchup it has, but Jolteon I'll talk a little bit more about later, but that doesn't affect Arrow's placement too much. Arrow, again, like it's a HO lead, it's gonna do its thing, right? Roserade. Roserade is a bit of a weird one, because T-Spikes has historically always struggled into like Clefable, and a lot of modern DPP teams are very resilient into T-Spikes. Usually they'll have a bunch of grounded, like their grounded mons are usually steel types, or they have Magic Guard and they don't care about it, and they'll have like multiple spike immunes on a team, like for example, or if they are affected by T-Spikes, then they're not too badly affected. Usually, yeah, so that's where most of Roserade's viability comes in. You can still run regular spikes on it, it's just that it's kind of outclassed as well, I guess on more offensive teams you could run spikes and then not feel too bad about it. Most of the time I just see Roserade on lead and it does its job very well. as a lead, like you just get sleep off. It's like a little bit more unreliable Breloom in that sense, but it has like a better speed tier and doesn't really need to run Scarf. That's how what I use Roserade for most of the time, but like Rose is a pretty iffy mon. It's better for like slower teams that can benefit off T-Spikes. And like T-Spikes does have some usage, like Infernape teams really hate T-Spikes, so that's where using T-Spikes might be really handy, or like that's a reason why you might consider using it, like being able to exploit those Infernape teams that like rely on Infernape to break through stuff. So there's that. And then like it'll sometimes run Hidden Power Ground to get the jump on Heatran. It can run HP Fire, you know, like there's not too much to say about Rose as a Pokemon. And yeah, like it's solid. It can do its thing, is what I'm saying. Scizor. Scizor's fall from grace ever since DPP stopped being a current generation has been interesting. I don't think the current environment is still particularly kind to Scizor. It still has times where like you're reminded, oh, hey, this is why Scizor is good, right? But I think like Heatran having become even more and more mandatory as time has come on for most people as kind of like the go-to Jirachi check, I think has really hurt Scizor a lot. Scizor, you can still get it to do its thing with like pivot spam, like you can run CB. CB still hits really hard with like CB U-turn, and it can still like revenge kill stuff like T-Tar. SD sets are okay, but I think they can be a little bit iffy. And not to mention, like, it'll still take a lot of damage from like a Specs Latias surf, so like there's that. Like it just can't really come in as easily, kinda. Its heyday is long gone, but it can still do its thing every now and then, and it can be really nice into stuff like Gengar, like being able to bullet punch it, or like just, but like it just fuds into stuff like Skarmory, fuds into like stuff like Heatran unless you like nail it with superpower on the switch. Some variants of Rotom can just completely cripple Scizor. Like, yeah, sure, you have Pursuit, but like again, like defensive Rotom can kind of just cripple you with that. And then like Bug Steel is like an okay typing, but like Scizor is not exactly the paragon of bulk, as some would say. But yeah, like maybe like Celebi's Resurgence can give Scizor a little bit more viability, but again, a lot of Celebis run like HP Fire sometimes to like beat Breloom, so like by proxy it also beats Scizor. So like there's that going for an Infernape's Resurgence is a little annoying for Scizor in some ways, but yeah, that's kind of the whole deal with Scizor. And then now after that, this is kind of where we get into like your UUBLs, your UUs, that kind of stuff. I have Kingdra, Obama Snow, and Fortress. Okay, Fortress is OU. That's kind of a lie on my end, but like these mons are all interesting in their own way. Kingdra I've tried to make work on multiple occasions to mix results. Specs Kingdra is like pretty good in the sense that it's a Lati that quad resists Heatran effectively, or like Water Dragon is like a pretty sound defensive type, and it really farms Heatran really well, and then like its stab combination kind of threatens the majority of the tier in some way or another. Like the only thing above on here that doesn't that kind of just resists both combos, both Dragon and Water, is Empoleon, and Empoleon has a lot of its own issues. So like yeah, it has a lot going for it. Again, like there's always the Clefable problem with every special attacker, but the other issue with Kingdra is that its speed tier is like in this really awkward spot. Like, yeah, it's faster than something like Breloom, but like you kind of have like it is technically 295, but like because Kingdra's stats are not so high, like they're kind of a bit more on the middling side, you kind of have to run something like Modest on specs. Obviously okay, DD Kingdra is like balls, if I'm being blunt here. Like, I cannot say I ever loved DD Kingdra too much. Like, it just feels like a flop most of the time, and like it doesn't fit on a lot. I would rather run like Rain Dance Kingdra, if I'm being honest, and I think there's some merit to that. The other nice thing is that for an offensive mon, like being able to resist Jirachi's Iron Head and then being neutral or resilient into most of its usual coverage options, except for maybe like the rare CM Jirachi with Draco Meteor. That's kind of like the thing that Kingdra's got going for it. It's nice like that. Again, like that speed tier is middling. Its stats are a little bit too middling to like truly shine in OU, but like again, I think there's matchups where it thrives a lot. And yeah, so that's the deal with Kingdra. As for Obama Snow is something that I've tried a handful of times. I did try mix Obama Snow. Like, it's not too bad, but it's pretty flawed because of the fact that like its hail means that it chips everything, including steals. But I remember I built a team. Actually, I posted on the forums. I might link the team. I might link that post in the description later if you guys want to check out that Obama Snow team that I made with like the Starmie, Gengar, and like Skarmory spikes. Offensive Obama is interesting. I think it can do really well into some pokes. You're always gotta have, but I think you need paralysis support for Obama Snow to really work. And the nice thing is that it can trade into stuff. It has some really good matchups against the Pokemon that are like higher up on this VR. Like, it has a decent matchup into offensive Suicune, decent matchup into most variants of Swampert. And then like Blizzard still nails something like Skarmory pretty hard most days on mixed sets. And then something like Gira, Obama Snow has a great matchup into that and has priority to check something like Flygon or like Dragonite. So like, yeah, there's a lot going for Obama Snow, but again, like Ice, Grass is like kind of a bad defensive typing most of the time. I think it needs paralysis support to really maximize its capabilities, like offensively. And then obviously you have like the defensive Obama Snow sets with Leech Protect, which is like not bad. Like Leech Protect, Wood Hammer, Ice Shard, probably that's kind of like the set I think of when it comes to like Obama Snow. And then you're using it to support something like Clefable so that you can wear down stuff like Jirachi a little bit better, so you could get like that perma damage on something like a Bronzong or like a Skarmory or a Heatran too, and then be kind of annoying. But yeah, the thing with Obama Snow, it has good traits. It is worth working around its shortcomings. There's the obvious Stealth Rock weakness, so that's kind of like the thing that Obama has going for and against it, and that's kind of why I have it B-, because like I think it has like a pretty high ceiling for what it can offer, but I think it can be a little bit difficult to build around sometimes. And then obviously there's like the whole Tyranitar can just come in and undo its snow, so that's another inherent issue it's always gonna have. But yeah, that's kind of what's going with for Obama. Fortress, I feel like I don't see Fortress nearly as often anymore. It's still seen sometimes, like it's okay on defensive teams, teams, like it can run either T-Spikes or Spikes, and then you ride with Rapid Spin. Like 4E's always gotta do its thing where it just spins stuff, throws out hazards. It's a little passive, but on the few teams, like those defensive teams that I can fit on, I think can do really well. Like I'm thinking of, there was that one team I remember playing against against Christos in DPP Cup this year. It was like Fortress with Rest, Talk, Roar, Gira, like stuff like that. Like that's the kind of stuff where like 4E would do pretty well, or like defensive teams like 4E Milo, like just, or like 4E Milo, Needle Queen, etc. Like stuff like that. Like that's kind of where like it thrives. It's very specific, only fits on like those kind of archetypes, and it does an okay job at it. It's not exactly a staple on those archetypes, but like it can be pretty annoying to break sometimes. Although like I think not having reliable recovery kind of works against it in that regard. But yeah, so that's the deal with 4E. Let's move on to C+ tiers. Okay, this is like probably my first real, I guess, controversial opinion, is that I think Jolteon is in the same tier as something like Uxie. And Jolteon, I think, is, again, like Jolteon's viability is almost solely carried by Baton Pass. So that's kind of the thing with Jolteon. I laddered with Jolteon a while back, and I got to like number 1 on the DPP ladder. I think it was like sometime early November. I might write a RMT on that at some point, or do a video on that Jolteon team that I used. I did use it in circuit championships. I did not win with that team, but when I was testing with it, I was like, okay, you know what, this thing has some really good qualities going for it. Jolteon, I think, mostly works as a lead. That's where I found the most success with it. And why does it work as a lead? When you look at the lead metagame in DPP, I promise I will not go too much into Jolteon. The thing with Jolteon is that it is very good into most offensive leads. If you're running like T-Bolt with HP Ice, right? And then like sub BP, has a really good matchup into lead Gyarados, lead Suicune, lead Empoleon, like basically all the offensive waters except for Swampert, right? And then against stuff that Jolteon might stink against, like lead Latias, you can use sub to kind of scout out what kind of move it'll lock into or what kind of set it is. So like sub's a really good scouting tool. And also the fact that it has the same speed tier as Aerodactyl works wonders for it. So this means it's also faster than Azelf. Jolteon can beat most variants of CB Azelf, or not CB Azelf, but like Azelf in general. CB is like either a neutral trade, or like Azelf just U-turns out, goes into its check. Volt Absorb is another big thing. There's some pairings that Jolteon can work with, like for example, now you can really use Gengar as a spin blocker against like defensive Starmie, because of the fact that Starmie now, like if it like tries to paralyze T-Wave to Gengar, like that's like attempting to spin block it, then like Jolteon come in, block the T-Wave attempt, get some HP back, and then now use Starmie as possible fodder, threaten a sub-baton pass to one of its teammates. Jolteon also pairs really well with Gyarados. Like you're probably thinking, oh my god, this is Gyravire, and to which I say Gyarajo is basically if Gyravire was remotely viable. I think there is some small semblance of viability going there for that. And then Breloom's another great beneficiary of the sub pass from Jolteon, because a lot of the stuff that Jolteon really hates, like Tyranitar, it can safely sub in as sub up as the Tyranitar comes in, and then T-Tar maybe tries to crunch it or pursue it. Now you have safe entry for your Breloom. And then like even stuff like the bad lead matchups that Jolteon has, it can just kind of baton pass get out of it. I think the trickier matchups might be something like Scarf Uxie, Scarf Giro. That's where things might get a little tricky, like trying to figure out if it is trick Scarf on those kind of sets, because like if Jolteon gets tricked, then it kind of loses a lot of its ability to do its thing. So, but I think like there are teams that you can make with that, where you can make Jolteon work. I don't think back Jolteon is that good, but I think lead Jolteon is like pretty viable. Like you could threaten stuff like D-Knight. You can do okay into like a lot of leads, like the hyper offense leads, except for Aerodactyl, is like I think Jolteon does pretty well against those. And it's very respectable in that regard, like as a lead. So that's kind of the thing that Jolteon has going for it. And like Volt Absorb, again, like really stops stuff like T-Wave spam. Although something like Jira can still like body slam and get a para, but that's kind of like the ordeal with Jolt. And then Jolt can also like use defensive zap as fodder if you're running like 72, 76-ish HP on the lead set, and then to keep the sub intact. Sand is always going to be a big issue for Jolt, so like this means like Hippowdon, Tyranitar. So I think like Jolt, Gira, Breloom, that's like a very natural pairing to work with. And yeah, no, I think that's why Jolt could be real good. I think it's very underexplored right now. Maybe back Jolt, I think like a little bit more experimentation from the player base would be really good. But we'll also have to see like what happens with like the Jirachi and like Machamp tearing action, because like if Jira's gone, then like I think Jolteon's viability might take a bit of a hit because that means Tyranitar gets even more popular, like if either of those go. But that is neither here nor there. Uxie is very good lead. You only ever really see it on lead. Scarf Uxie is like a good anti-HO lead. It can kind of like either trick, or you could do like trick Flame Orb. I remember PKO thought about that using that. It's not a bad set. And then you have like the regular defensive bulky sets that can like kind of just eat hits up, U-turn out. Like it's very passive, but it's honestly okay. I've used it a few times. Like it can be decent, but yeah, no, it's not. It's all right. Donphan again, very specific. It's like a rocker, and a ground type that can check opposing dragons, and just very bulky in general, but usually something you see on like more balanced teams, or like stuff that, or like it's supporting something like a Restalk Gyarados or a Zapdos, or like something like Obama Snow. Yeah, Donphan and Obama Snow is like not a bad pairing, and then throw in a Clef, and then like kind of got something nice going there, or like maybe those double spinner teams, like that's another spot where you might see Donphan. But Donphan's okay. Wouldn't call it like super great, but I've never like found a lot of success with it. But I think where it shines is like usually on those paraspam teams or stuff where like you really need to keep hazards off, and that's where Donphan does alright. Milotic, I only ever see this thing on defensive teams for the most part, although okay, that's a lie. I do see it on like more balanced teams once in a blue moon, but like most of the time you're seeing this thing on like a defensive team it can run something like Dragon Breath to have like another kind of paras spreader in that regard. Like recovers okay, like, you know, and be able to like resist Jirachi's Iron Head, although Milotic is like pure water typing is okay, but like it's like a strange mon to me in that like it's okay, but I've never really found a reason to build with it per se. But I think it's something that like if you can find the team for it, then I think there's like some decent reward, but I think it only really fits on defensive teams, but it's alright, which is I think a fair assessment. Rhyperior. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest, Rhyperior, I was not really sure if I want to move it up to B-, because I think there's times where it's really, really good. I think it's better than most of C++. Like, I kind of mentioned at the start of the video that, hey, look, like, after, like, probably, I didn't care too much about particular order for, like, the lower ends of this viability rankings, but, yeah, like, Rhyperior, decent mon, it can farm. Again, like really good at punishing those passive teams, and then like there's like some pretty funny stuff you can do with Rhyperior, such as like just giving it a sub to sit behind, like off a sub BP. Oh my god, yeah. I need to stop mentioning that, but yeah, so like it hits very hard, obviously, really good on Paraspam teams. Like I think in this past SPO it's kind of become like a competitor to like Machamp as like a Paraspam abuser. I remember I built a Paraspam or a semi Paraspam team that had like SD Rhyperior as like a win con, and I think like Rhyperior hits super hard, like, and like, you know, like Stone Edge plus EQ, and then obviously you can run something like Ice Punch's coverage, and like it can just go places. So that's kind of like the whole shtick with Rhyperior. And then like Solid Rock too, like if you run Rhyperior with T-Tar, then like, you know, it's got like deceptively good bulk and being able to survive a lot of stuff. I remember running this one team with I think it might have been SOS squad with like Rindleberry Rhyperior, so like, you know, you could do some crazy stuff there, but Rock Ground is like a pretty flawed typing, so a lot of stuff can actually just force it out pretty easily, so, which is like kind of unfortunate for Rhyperior. But again, like it's a good Paraspam abuser, debatably B-, but again, like solid mon, kind of needs a lot to go right for it to shine. Yeah, so that's kind of what's happening with Rhyperior. Quagsire, water absorb, like that's basically why you run it. Good on stall teams. Like I've seen like the curse sets. Like curse sets are like good win con on like those very bulky teams like you're playing the long game. And then like sometimes like there are just teams that cannot touch it that well, like it can wall non-taunt variants of Gyarados and then threaten like a toxic, or like, you know, like just be like really annoying to break through. And then like it can wall stuff like Starmie, offensive Starmie to be more specific, and then stuff like Zapdos might have trouble touching it. Like, yeah, that's kind of the deal with Quagsire, but I think obviously Breloom's presence in the tier hurts it a little bit, like viability wise. But yeah, no, Quagsire, good mon. Very again, like a lot of these C+ mons are very specific. That's kind of its whole deal. Raikou, I debated putting in C, but mostly because I've never had super great success with Raikou. Lead all-out attacker Raikou is like okay, I think. Like, you know, it's obviously got like Aura Sphere, which unfortunately you have to be shiny all the time, because like if you're not shiny, then you're kind of telling your opponent, hey, I don't have Aura Sphere. So like that's kind of like one of those weird like event move like oddities that you see sometimes in like old gens. But that's kind of the ordeal of Raikou. You run like T-Bolt, Ice Beam, or not Ice Beam, HP Ice, Aura Sphere, and then E-Speed on lead. That set is still okay. Back Raikou, again, like it's kind of fallen off over years because of like Clefable's presence, Latias' presence, but it can still do its thing with like CM every now and then. But again, it's not something I go out my way to run, and I definitely think it's worse than Jolteon at the moment, or at least I think that's kind of my personal take on Raikou. It just feels like on paper it has a lot going for it, but like in practice it just feels like it falls short, mostly because like there's the whole sand problem, and then like you don't have like E-Speed's nice on lead, but like that's kind of the issue with Raikou, is that it just feels like outside of lead, like back Raikou, like with CM and stuff, feels like it just doesn't do enough. That's my overall issue with it. Hariyama I think is okay. Like, you know, like Fake Out with like Toxic Orb, Payback, like as a lead I think it's okay in that regard. And then I think like it's a okay sub EP abuser. I know Piteous tried to make a team with that, didn't quite work out for him, but like the idea was that you use Celebi to pass the sub off to like Hariyama would like bulk up and then like just do a bunch of damage behind the sub. That was kind of the overall idea with it, and so there's that. But I think Hariyama, again, like the longevity thing, like the fact that to really get mileage out in a tier that has a lot of viable fighting type Pokemon, like the fact that you have to continuously wear yourself down in a tier with sand is a little bit unfortunate, and I think it's a little bit outclassed as a fighter. But I think as a lead, there's like some things going for it, or like just kind of like as a wall breaker, I think it can go places. Because I remember seeing Laurel use a team of lead Hariyama, and like it did pretty well for him. So I think there's times where it can work, but I'm very iffy on it. I'm like, it can work, but like, yeah. Shaman, I do not rate Shaman that highly, if I'm being completely honest. 1, Latias, 2, Clefable. That's kind of a common trend for a lot of the special attackers, where like it might struggle against these, and Shaman is like, it's just not what it used to be. Like I think it was like, yeah, no, I just don't think Shaman is that great. I've never found it's got base 100s across the board, but I just feel like for a mythical, it's just like I don't feel strongly about it. Togekiss. I have never had too much success with Togekiss, but I mean, Osgood keeps saying that people are not using this thing right. Maybe there's something that he sees that I do not. I've heard like people like Ladon thinking that this thing should be banned. I was not sure where to rank it. I was like, okay, I don't want to rank it too high, but I still want to give it its due. So like C+ feels appropriate. You know, so that's kind of the whole thing for me, is like Togekiss, okay, you know, we can go somewhere, but it's kind of per se. But like, you know, Air Slash, Serene Grace, all that stuff, like Flinch. It is basically a poor man's Jirachi, although you probably don't want to use it that way, because like, you know, like normal flying is like not exactly a stalwart typing by any means, but Air Slash real annoying though if you can get it going. But yeah, that's kind of my take on Togekiss as of right now. Blissey, oh how the mighty have fallen. Again, like Blissey's issue is that it's basically vulnerable to all types of passive damage, like spikes, rocks. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Clefable severely outclasses it as a blob, but I mean, it's very specific. Like, there's very few teams that I think can make use of Blissey, and like, I don't think Blissey, I don't rate Blissey that much. I'm just like, it's okay, but it's like, oh man, sorry, I'm like also really tired, but Gastrodon is like, it's okay, like, you know, it's got recovery. Like, you know, being able to wall something like Gyarados goes a long way, except for you know, natural gift lychee berry variants, which I guess that comment also applies to Quagsire too, but you know, Gastrodon, it's okay on some fat teams. I think it can do some things pretty well. And then, like, again, like the whole water ground thing, it's got that going. You could do like some curse stuff. That's kind of like the thing with Gastro. Cresselia, again, Healing Wish. Usually you are not going to kill this thing. This thing will kill itself instead, which sums up Crest pretty well. And then it will spread T-Wave, be super annoying, and then like its coverage is just good enough to get the job done. Which sums up Cresselia pretty well. Smeargle, yeah, like Spore, it's a Cheesemon. There's not much to say there. Nidoqueen, again, T-Spike's not what it used to be. It can still do its thing every now and then, and I think like some stall teams can make use of Nidoqueen, but again, it's not that stalwart Pokemon that it had during its peak. And like, yeah, you know, you could punish like Machamp spamming to some degree, like with Poison Point and all that stuff. So that's like the one thing it has going for it. And like it can be very hard to kill sometimes. That's something that I've noticed when I've played against Nidoqueen, is that it will do just enough. It will do just enough to survive, and then kill you back. Yeah, so that's like all the C+ tiers, and then I'll quickly maybe go over the C Pokemon. But like I said, the C tier Pokemon, I'm not gonna go too in depth into it. I'll talk about some stuff. I'll be quick here. Crobat, Infiltrator, Taunt lead, like, you know, just, it's okay lead. Heracross is just mostly outclassed as a fighter. Like, Choice Scarf can be okay. Heracross is very, very iffy. Like, I don't find it too great. I think like, yeah, if you're gonna use it, use Scarf with like maybe Sleep Talk, I guess. Like, Gallade had its moment in the sun for a little bit with like Wisp and all that stuff, like diverse move pool, but it's just too frail, like just not that great outside of lead. No real reason to use it, and its speed tier is not that great, so it just feels very outclassed in general. Tentacruel, again, like spinner that can throw out T-Spikes, like it's alright, can do some things. Weavile, again, like it's Weavile. Okay, Weavile on paper should be a good Pokemon. Keyword is on paper, right? Dark Ice typing, or offensively, that's great, right? The unfortunate issue is that its stab moves do not hit that hard. It does. Icicle Crash does not exist. Knockoff is not even like the spammable move that it is until later. It doesn't have triple axle. It doesn't have all that, right? It is working off of Ice Punch, Night Slash, and then like Low Kick is nice coverage to like hit Heatran and Tyranitar really hard, but like the quad weakness to Mach Punch really hurts it, and it's also just very frail, and it just doesn't do enough. Like, it just doesn't hit hard enough is the issue, and then you don't really have those turns to safely set up if you're running SD. Like, yeah, it has priority. Like, on paper, it should have all that going. But again, like Stealth Rock, spikes, like sand, all big problem, and doesn't hit nearly as hard as you think it would. That's basically Weavile in a nutshell, and it just feels like a disappointment. Mesprit, it is a poor man's Uxie with better speed tier, or marginally. Actually, I don't even know if it's actually better speed tier, but yeah, no, it's basically like it's like a weird hybrid between Uxie and Azelf, which is also kind of how its stats are distributed. Kind of does similar things, it hits a little bit harder, I guess, but yeah, like not much to say about Mesprit. Kabutops, Omastar, Quillfish, Ludicolo, Rainmons on like the Rain archetype, like those are stuff you would use on Rain. Quillfish has Boom, Ludicolo has like the Grass Water typing, which is pretty good offensively on Rain. Kabutops hits hard. Omastar also has like spikes and stuff, but yeah, no, that's basically, you're usually only seeing these on some variant of manual Rain teams. Hitmontop, again, like Spinner, Mach Punch, Intimidate, like again on paper it should be good, but like it's just not, hasn't really been that dude since Latios got reintroduced in DPP like about like 5-ish years ago at this point now. Mamoswine, I tried using this thing as a lead. I think it was underwhelming. Again, like not having a great a physical ice stab move that it can just spam hurts it a lot. Okay as a lead, like yeah, you have priority, you have like Ice Ground is like okay, and like, but again, like you're kind of own, like it just doesn't actually do that well as a lead. Like I just don't think it's that great. I think it's like just fairly mediocre. Mid game, like Mamoswine in the back can be okay, like with like substitute and stuff, that's where it can do a lot of damage, but like it's just kind of hard to use. I think Vaporeon, not even Baton Pass could save this thing, if I'm being honest. Water Absorb, like in theory it should be able to be okay, but like in practice it's just underwhelming. Yeah, no, like Registeel, again, like defensive Mon, but works on some defensive teams. Moltres is not really worth the Quad's Stealth Rock weakness. Cradily is like whatever. I only really put it there because of like Suction Cup Cheese. Like you pass a sub to it, and then like, or like you bring it in and then like you just cheese stuff. You can't phase it out, all that jazz, right? But like rock grass typing is like just thoroughly mediocre, and in some cases just downright bad. PZ is potential man. Probopass, like yeah, no, a lot like Probopass, I like you can do some funny stuff with it, but like again, it's kind of a meme. Like I might. It's probably like in the no tier, but I'm too lazy to move it. I'm also like super tired. Other stuff on here. Venusaur, haven't seen anybody use it since like 2018. But I guess like it has sleep powder. It can do some stuff, but who knows? Like if Clefable ever gets banned, which I know some people want, then maybe Venu can be viable again. Spiritomb outclassed by Rotom. Snorlax, again, like it's kind of whatever. Like, yeah, everything else in C tier I was just kind of like, or like the latter half of C tier, and no, I was just like, I didn't really want to cramp this up, and I was just like, I don't really care. The rest are kind of like whatever. However, I don't know, if somebody asked me in the comment section, I could maybe try to talk my way out of it, explain it, whatever, but yeah, no, if you have gotten this far, I appreciate you listening to me rant about DPP viability and all that stuff. And obviously, like, comment, subscribe. Maybe I'll put out more DPP content. Who knows? But yeah, I will see you guys next time.